and one was an exact perfect focus, and the other one was a little bit out of focus.
Gotcha.
And so I feel like the colder, the one that I ran at 52 in my fermenter, it's cleaner, although the one that I run at 62, there's, well, now, you say when we say there's no fusels, we all understand that a good part of what we like in the flavor profile of our meads are actually fusels. So I won't say there's no fusels, but it just seems like the colder batch is more, it's cleaner somehow, even though I wouldn't say the warmer batch is dirty. And there's more notes, there's more space between the notes. I'm a guitar player, and if you play on a clean channel with not a lot of gain, you can hear each individual note, but as you start to turn up your gain, you start to break up and get some distortion, and it kind of blends the notes together. And so I feel like the lower temperature is cleaner in that regard. It gives more open space for all the notes to sound off.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's probably a kind of a strange way to describe a flavor, and I wouldn't maybe necessarily expect people that are not music lovers to really understand the last part, but I think the camera explanation kind of says the same thing in a different aspect, from a different point of view.
Sure. The one that's warmer, do you find that it has a wider, more mouth-filling profile than the one that's cooler?
Now that you bring that up, Pete, yes. Very, very minute difference. But yes, that would be the case as well. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, that's usually red wines are fermented at higher temperatures, and that's why I was asking.
Right.
I've done them at lower temperatures and found, for me at least, that the kinds of grapes that I'm using, which is mainly Zinfandel and Grenache and sometimes some Petit Syrah, tend to have, they open up more at a higher temperature. At a lower temperature, they tend to be, they've got plenty of fruit and plenty of floral attributes, but the actual spiciness and the garrigue, if you will, the kind of herbal notes that you find around the Mediterranean and all that, tend to come out less because it hasn't been, for lack of a better term, volatilized during the fermentation from the extra heat. But I like them both, just like you said, and I think the space in between the notes is pretty apt.
I don't know at this point if I'll end up blending them back together later down the road, or if I'll keep them separate, or maybe I'll do both. Maybe I'll do both. I don't know yet. I've got a little bit of oak in both of them, but it hasn't been enough of a chance for much extraction for that piece to really start to come around yet.
Nice. Welcome to the Got Mead Live Wine Show.
Exactly.
That's really good. Thought we were going to talk about mead tonight, didn't we?
Yeah.
One thing too, Peter, that I noticed with this, I used K1V on this particular batch, and I was not, when I first started making meads, I wasn't as much of a fan with that strain because I didn't like some of the esters that it produced. But I think what I found through experience was over time, those esters kind of seemed to step back away from the forefront some. And I would also say that the cooler batch seems to not quite carry as much of those esters that strain makes. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I for lack of a better term, I found it kind of rosy when it's post-esterification and post-fermentation, before it sits down and ages and has a chance to kind of just like rest before it goes into élevage and polymerization. But I like K1B because it's a good, clean flavor fermenter. I mean, it really doesn't step on the natural, delicacy of the fruit itself or the nuances of the fruit, and in honey as well, I think. I actually used that in that Falls Bounty Sizer clone that I made of Ken Schramm's. I called it Mutiny on the Bounty, and I used K1B and added some other things in there. But I kind of like, if I take somebody's recipe, I always do some kind of little twist on their title to make sure that they get the credit in it when I do it.
Right.
There were a couple of, well, Roger Morse was kind of hard to do that with because he was just like goldenrod honey, you know. So like, okay, how do we twist that one? Kind of hard. But, yeah, in any case, so I think flavor profiles are very important, and that's kind of what was in the back of my head when I was talking to you last time, is just, you know, different flavor profiles in the honey itself. And I think we kind of started talking about, you know, how people approach making mead. A lot of people, you know, get everything together. They're what I call the organized folks. You know, they get the bucket out, they have their cleaning solution out, they have their sanitization fluid out, they have everything else ready to go. They've got it all lined up and mapped out. They've got like a little chart or a bulleted list that they're going to work from. And I do that too. And they've decided, you know, okay, I found this really great fruit, and now what kind of honey should I match up to it? And, you know, the two of those blended together, oh, that tastes really good. Let's go ahead and pitch our yeast on it and everything. And then we have kind of the people that I would call for lack of a better term, the jazz musician that has all that stuff rather than having an orchestrated set of music, you know, for the piano, the violin, the string section, the horn section, the percussion section, all written out in standard orchestration format. He'll have like a lead chart with tablature and the chords up there at the top, and the melody line underneath those on the treble. And then if there's any, you know, significant bass, it'll be written in the clef down below. But as the way that I do it is, when I get my honey, the first thing I do is I just sit down for the first few days, and sometimes a couple of weeks or even longer than that, and just taste it like every day or every other day. Because on any given day, you're going to taste different things. Not because the honey changes, although over time it changes very subtly, but because your palate changes day to day, depending on what you ate the night before, how long it had been since you brushed your teeth, what you used to brush your teeth, you know, what you had for breakfast, what you had for lunch. Did you have something spicy? Did you have something savory? Did you have something sweet? And that influences for quite amount of time, you know, what you're tasting. And so I think it's good to have an overtime sampling of the honey that you're going to be using before you decide on, you know, okay, I've got this great avocado honey and I am going to make a braggot out of it because avocado honey kind of tastes malty, and it makes a really good base in a braggot, and it makes an excellent braggot. You know, I know that from personal experience of tasting other people that have used avocado honey. It makes a great braggot with, you know, whatever kind of, you know, unless you're going, you know, like an American light lager or an American lager or something like that, I'd probably change that honey to something different, maybe sage or clover. But I think for me, I kind of approach it as, okay, here's the basic flavor. I've got this really great avocado honey, and it's got some nice kind of sweet malty notes like malto meal or a sweet oatmeal kind of together there. It's also got some nice mapley notes and some caramel notes, maybe even some molasses, rum, and other flavors in there as well. And so to me, before I start looking at it as, okay, this is going to be a braggot, it's avocado honey and makes great braggot, I taste it and I kind of like get an idea in my head of what the flavors are like. And I do that over the course of a couple of days. So, you know, by the time I've sat and had my way with it, if you will, on tasting it, that's okay. I've got a really good idea of the kind of things the sensations that I get while I'm tasting it in the front of the mouth, in the back of the mouth, across the tongue, across the roof of the mouth, under the tongue, sides of the tongue, toward the back of the throat, the warmth that it gives, the flavor profile it gives, the nuances of the aromas that it gives off on the retronasal, all the different kinds of, sensations and feelings you get from the honey itself and then from the flavors. You want to kind of like tease those out. It's always a good idea, I think, too, to just keep some notes to yourself. They don't have to be formal notes. You don't have to do a tasting chart, although I know people that do that. I used to be a charter. I'd have all kinds of stuff. I did it on, the computer so I could type faster, and my handwriting is horrendous. A product of Catholic school and working in a clinical laboratory for a number of years, where you sign at the end of the night 400 or 500 little pieces of paper, put your initials and signature on it to make sure that everything you did was done right. Your signature suffers, and over time, now in this computer age, all I do is type. And when I actually get a pen in my hand and I have to take notes and I have to write, my hand hooks up into a claw in like about 5 or 10 minutes or less. It's almost impossible to write after that because my hand hurts so bad. But just keep some little notes: nutty, fruity, woody, sherry, peaty. Not me, but like Pete Moss or Pete. But and you take those kind of things, and then what you do is you start ordering them. Do those notes fall mostly into earthy? Do they fall into earthy as in like wood, or kind of like a mineralic kind of a flavor, or mushroomy, or anything else that would fall kind of into an earthy kind of a thing, although I guess a mushroom would be more vegetative. But, and then, what falls into the spice? Is there spiciness? They're allspices. They're clove, mace, nutmeg, cardamom, cumin. You'd be surprised how much cumin is in honeys, too. I don't mean the actual, spice itself, but the after flavor, or the hint at. And I think that's what I'm getting at. What does the honey hint at? And what categories is it hinting at in? So when you're sitting down and tasting your honey, to me, that's kind of like my basic melody line with on the lead chart. It gives me the chords, but it doesn't give me, the actual, melody that everybody's going to be following, and it certainly doesn't go into the improv down the road. But what it does is it sets up that rhythm. It sets up the bass chord changes before you hit into the bridge and you pull a change on everyone. So what I like to do is, after I've done that, I'll sit down and I'll order those into like little categories: spicy, woody, earthy, and then tease those out a little bit more. And I do this in my head pretty quickly as to where it's going to go. But, it's always good to start slowly, and writing it down is a really good way of rote learning, of organizing this stuff all into thought patterns so that you can go, okay, so this avocado honey is really got some earthy notes. It's really got some great spicy notes, and it's really got some great, kind of like body notes for caramel and butterscotch and toffee and kind of things. So do I want to mix that with grain? Do I want to mix that with fruit? Do I want to mix that with other things? And depending on, where the most hits fall into your little columns of where they are, if it's spicy, that's when I start looking at adding spices to it to kind of nudge it along during the fermentation. And so if I'm getting things that are kind of like spicy, like allspice or cinnamon or clove or nutmeg or something like that, I'll go ahead and in the fermentation vessel, I'll sink a grain bag with some spice in it. Not a lot, because what I'm not trying to do is, I don't want to step on the honey itself right now. All I want to do is kind of nudge it in the right direction, and I want to nudge it toward the spice. So as it ferments, I'm going to go ahead and just let it go and taste it, when I pull samples. And I'm kind of a geek. I have a bench centrifuge that I go ahead and when I